Okay, so let's talk about pastry cream. There's a million recipes out there for pastry cream, and all of them serve a specific purpose depending on the dessert or the cake or any baked good that you are going to make. There's different types of thickening agents in pastry cream depending on its purpose. The pastry cream that we are going to make today, we're going to be using cornstarch. I need a very thick, very super stable pastry cream for our purpose when filling cakes. I'm not a fan of using straight custard or pastry cream in cakes, but if you enjoy that type of filling or if it's a preference of yours, then absolutely fill your cakes with pastry cream. But the pastry cream that I'm showing you today, I wouldn't suggest making to use as is for a filling in a cake. You definitely want to mix the pastry cream with additional whipped cream to lighten it up, because I prefer a much lighter cream filling in the cakes that I make. So this recipe calls for cornstarch and whole eggs. The cornstarch is a coagulant as well as the whole eggs. There are other pastry cream recipes that call for flour or arrowroot. You can use tapioca starch. You're not going to get a really thick, super stable pastry cream. You can use flour if you'd like. I suggest that you experiment with different types of starches in your pastry cream to discover what works best for you and your purpose. Okay, so here I have some of my whole milk in a heavy stainless steel pot. Give yourself plenty of room in the pot to make your pastry cream, because you're going to be adding all of these ingredients to this pot when you're cooking your pastry cream. So make sure you're working with a very large pot. This is my granulated sugar here. This is my cornstarch. This is my reserve milk to dissolve my cornstarch in. Here's my whole eggs. There's some vanilla in it. And I also have another bowl ready and a container with a strainer on it, because I'm going to strain the pastry cream after we cook it on the stove. I want to talk to you quickly about whisks. You can't just grab any old whisk to make your pastry cream. You're going to make your pastry cream and stir it with a whisk, not a rubber spatula or a wooden spoon or anything like that. You need to use a whisk, because as you're cooking the pastry cream, you have to whisk very vigorously to make sure that you're incorporating all your ingredients at a rapid pace, because you're cooking on a very high heat at all times. So whatever you've learned out of your school books, I'm going to ask you to just toss it aside for now, because we're going to make pastry cream a little differently than how you're being taught. Your whisk has to have thick wires on it, nothing too thin or too flexible. I don't know if you can see it, but the wires on this whisk are much thinner than the wires on this one. You want a heavy duty, very sturdy whisk. You want to make sure that it's long enough that your hand is not inside the pot when you're cooking your pastry cream. When your pastry cream is boiling rapidly, you're going to run the risk of burning yourself. So you don't want to get your hands too close to the inside of the pot. So make sure you have a nice whisk that's in proportion to the pot that you're using. So here I have my pot of cold milk. I'm going to just pour my sugar in it, and I'm going to put this on the stove while I talk to you about the rest of the ingredients. I want to get this started to boil. I don't whisk the sugar in the milk at this point. I'm just going to leave it and coat it on the bottom of the pot, and I'm going to put it on high heat. Your pastry cream is going to cook a lot faster when you cook on high heat on a gas stove. I don't have a gas stove, I have an electric stove. This heat is not as intense as a gas stove, so this process is going to take me a little bit longer. Therefore, I'm going to run the potential of burning my pastry cream. So we have to work fast and efficiently. While this is coming to a boil, I'm going to create a slurry, S-L-U-R-R-Y. What that is I'm dissolving my starch in cold milk. Whenever you work with cornstarch, you must, by all means, dissolve your cornstarch in cold liquid first before you add it to hot liquid or boiling liquid. And that applies to anything in baking and cooking. I'm just going to start to dissolve my cornstarch in the cold milk by whisking it. Just keep whisking, whisking, whisking until everything is completely dissolved. The cornstarch that was in this bowl was very lumpy. You don't have to strain it. You don't have to sift it. You don't have to do anything with it because it will dissolve in the milk. And as you can see, there's no lumps. It's all dissolved in the cold milk. And I'm just gonna break these up and get them ready for my pastry cream. When you have milk on the stove heating, you just wanna make sure you keep an eye on it because it will boil over if you're not watching it. So every once in a while, take a peek and make sure that your milk is not ready to boil over before you're ready to make your pastry cream. So I'm just gonna whisk up my eggs. Now, when I'm ready to make the pastry cream or cook the pastry cream on the stovetop, I'm gonna combine these two together. But I'm not gonna do that just yet. I'm gonna combine the eggs and the cornstarch slurry together right before I'm ready to create my liaison with my hot milk and sugar and my egg cornstarch mixture. So sit tight. Okay, so there's a couple things I want to talk to you about when you're making your pastry cream. I don't know if you could hear it, but it's starting to make like a sizzling, bubbling sound. I'm just going to stir it around to make sure that the heat is now being evenly distributed in the milk with my sugar, okay? The reason why you can't allow the starch to sit in the egg mixture while you're waiting for this to come to a boil is because the starch literally interferes with the coagulation of your eggs because they're both fighting for the liquid, for the moisture in your pastry cream. So you don't want to start this combination of starch and egg too soon. You want to combine them when you're close to cooking them on the stove. I cannot start this mixing cooking process with the coagulant, which is my egg and my cornstarch, until this comes to a rolling boil. It's really important that your milk comes to a rolling boil before you begin the liaison process of tempering your egg and cornstarch mixture and then putting it back into the pot. It's going to shorten the cooking time. After I add my egg cornstarch mixture back into the pot and I start to cook it again, I must whisk it vigorously on high heat and continue to boil it for approximately 3 minutes. The reason why I'm telling you that is you must cook the starch out. If you don't cook the starch out, pastry cream will taste chalky and it may re-liquefy after the pastry cream has cooled off. So it's important to cook your starch out for at least 3 minutes. What I mean by that is boil it on very high heat for 3 minutes. You cannot lower the heat. That's like the first thing that people want to do when they're just like learning how to make pastry cream because they feel like they can't keep up with the pastry cream. But you're going to have to continue to practice to do this. And I would suggest just making a smaller version of what I'm making here. I want to talk to you about vanilla really quick. You could use vanilla extract or vanilla bean in your pastry cream. you should really add your vanilla extract after you're done cooking your pastry cream. Vanilla bean should be added when you start to boil your milk and sugar on the stove to infuse as much of that vanilla flavor into the pastry cream. Vanilla bean is not necessary in my case because I'm adding so many other flavors to my pastry cream / whipped cream filling. So vanilla is an enhancer for other flavors in my pastry cream filling for my cake. So if you're making a large batch, especially a large batch of pastry cream on your own, it's kind of tricky. What I would suggest is put a damp towel on the table and put your bowl on top of it. It kind of anchors the bowl so it doesn't move around while you're whisking it. My milk is starting to simmer a little bit, and I'm going to, let me just give this a quick stir, because your cornstarch kind of separates out of the milk and settles to the bottom. So I'm going to give it a quick stir again. I'm going to mix this into my eggs. Now I'm going to work fast. You cannot delay. You can't, take your time doing this. You have to work very, very quickly. I'm going to mix this together very thoroughly. Okay, we're starting to boil. I'm going to take some of my hot milk and I'm going to temper my eggs or create a liaison. So what this does is it doesn't shock this cold milk before I mix it back into the pot. Now, I whisked it when I added the hot milk so I don't cook anything. And I'm going to start to very vigorously whisk my pastry cream. Now, if you have any little eggshells are in here, don't worry about it. But you don't ever want to stop whisking for a couple of reasons. You don't want to burn the mixture. There's a lot of protein in here. It will burn very quickly if you don't whisk. And you don't want the cornstarch and the eggs to coagulate on the perimeter or the bottom of the pot before the rest of the mixture begins to coagulate. Now, I can feel it getting thicker on the bottom of the pot with my whisk, and you have to make sure that you're scraping the corners of the pot, the side, the walls, the inside walls of the pot, and the bottom of the pot. And you see how I keep switching my hand? So I'm getting all angles. And I don't know if you can see it, but it is starting to get a little bit thicker, but nowhere near as thick as this pastry cream gets. If you don't whisk fast enough, you're gonna have giant lumps of cooked cornstarch egg mixture in your pastry cream, and your pastry cream will be very, very soupy, and you just won't have a good result. You'll probably have to throw it out. You can't put it back on the stove and try to whisk those lumps of coagulated cornstarch egg. It just doesn't work. Once the starch in the egg mixture coagulates, that's it. There's no turning back. You may have teeny tiny lumps in your pastry cream, but that's why we strain it out afterwards on cooking it. Can you see it getting thicker? And I haven't slowed down my whisking. You have to continue to whisk and scrape and get in the corner of your pot. Now this is a larger recipe. If you were to cook a smaller recipe of pastry cream, it'll be a lot easier, and you may not have to cook it or boil it as long after you add the pastry cream. Maybe boil for 2 minutes. So look what's happening here. It's really starting to thicken and coagulate, but I haven't stopped. I have not stopped. whisking. Now, once this pastry cream coagulates, and now you can see it boiling, right? You see those boil? There you go. Now keep your face away from the pastry cream because this can like pop up and burn your face. I've seen it happen, so be super careful. Now you can slow down your stirring process because the pastry cream has coagulated. Now we're just cooking out that starchy taste. If I took this off the stove right now and I tasted it, it would taste starchy. It would taste like chalk in your mouth. And if Sarah took it off the stove now and I allowed it to cool, it would return to a soupy custard. It wouldn't maintain its thick, coagulated texture. So I usually instruct people at this point to boil with a timer. So now it's boiling, and we're gonna boil it for 3 minutes on the stove. But I'm gonna continue to scrape, but I can go a little slower now because I don't have to worry about the lumps like I did before. But you just wanna continue to stir and stir and stir. Okay, so this has been about 3 minutes. I would always suggest that you taste your pastry cream. I know, yes, it's hot, but this is a telltale sign. If it tastes chalky in your mouth, then keep cooking it. It's good. Okay, so I'm gonna take it off the stove. Look, I want you to see how thick it is. Now, my pastry cream is very thick. There's other pastry creams that are much thinner than this or looser than this, and that's fine. Again, depending on the purpose of your use. This is the point I would be adding my vanilla extract. And I'm going to pour it through a strainer. Actually, I don't think this strainer is big enough. So here I have my strainer over a very clean bucket, and I'm just gonna pour my pastry cream into the strainer. And I'm gonna scrape everything out. You don't wanna lose all that delicious goodness of your pastry cream. Now, you see tiny little lumps. It could be egg, could be a little bit of cornstarch, but this will make your pastry cream very, very smooth. You could see the egg that's being left behind. I obviously burnt the bottom of my pot, and that's because I'm working on an electric stove top, and there's nothing that can be done about that. You just have to be careful not to overcook, like to the point where you taste the burnt milk in your pastry cream. But see all these little goobers, as I call them? That's your egg. So it's always great to strain any custard because custard is a heavy egg product, and you'll get a much more silky, smooth custard or pastry cream if you strain it out. Okay, now that I poured my pastry cream into the bucket, I'm going to take a piece of plastic wrap and I'm going to cover the pastry cream flush with the plastic wrap. And the reason why I do this is to prevent the pastry cream from forming a skin on it. And then what you'll do is put this into your refrigerator and use it the following day. The reason why I'm telling you to put this in the refrigerator overnight is because you never want to use your pastry cream the same day that you make it. It needs to be completely cooled in the refrigerator and totally coagulated and set before you use it as a filling for cakes. If you're making a softer pastry cream to fill pastries or for another use, that's a different story. But in our case, we're using this pastry cream specifically to fill cakes. I hope you enjoyed this video and you found it very educational.